Living with a wife is one thing, but living with a wife and her secret twin who swap places like it's a game? Yeah, I thought I was losing my mind too. But when their little trust test turned out to be part of a bigger scheme, I realized I'd been dragged into their twisted family drama. And what happened next? That was just the beginning. All right, so my name's Mark, 27, and I'm not here to waste time with formal intros. Just got married to this girl, Megan. Smart, beautiful, the whole package, you know? Our romance was like fireworks, explosive and unpredictable. But now that we're living together, things are getting weird. At first, it was the little stuff, things anyone would ignore. One day, Megan would have a bit of an edge, like she was mad about something I didn't even do, and the next, she'd be back to her sweet, gentle self. I chalked it up to mood swings or whatever, but soon it got harder to ignore. One day, she'd have this tiny scar on her wrist, almost like a faded line. I'd notice it, then poof. The next day, it'd be gone. Not like it faded, but gone, like it had never been there. "Hey, Megan," I'd ask, trying to sound casual. "You ever notice your scar changes?" She'd look at me with that playful grin, rolling her eyes. "You're imagining things, Mark. I'm fine," she'd say, like it was the dumbest question in the world. But her eyes told a different story. They had this mischievous glint, like she was holding on to some secret. And every time I tried to probe, she'd just change the topic, laughing it off like I was overthinking things. Maybe I was, but it felt like she was hiding something. Days passed, and my curiosity only grew. I'd find myself staring at her when she wasn't looking, hoping to catch some clue. Her laugh would sound different. Her smile would have this edge to it that felt off. One morning, I even caught myself wondering if she had a twin or something. But that sounded way too crazy, right? This was real life, not some soap opera. Then one evening, she came home late, saying she'd been at the gym. Nothing weird there, except she didn't have any workout gear with her. When I asked, she brushed it off, saying she'd left it in the car. But when I went to check the car later that night, yeah, I was that paranoid, it was empty. Not a single gym bag or a trace that she'd even been there. Dude, I thought to myself, what's going on here? By now, I was in too deep to let it slide, so I started paying extra attention to everything. The way she walked, the way she talked, every small detail that could either prove me right or show me I was losing it. I couldn't shake this feeling, like I was living with a stranger who looked like my wife. And you know what? It's not that she was acting suspicious every single day. Some days, she was the same Megan I'd fallen for, sweet and funny, making me forget any doubts. But then, just when I thought it was all in my head, that scar on her wrist would appear again, and I'd be right back at square one, trying to make sense of it all. One night, I caught myself staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, almost hoping she'd transform into someone else right in front of me. Ridiculous, I know. But that's where I was, questioning everything, trying to figure out if the woman I married was who I thought she was. And as I stood there, piecing together all these strange moments, I knew one thing for sure. Something was seriously off. And if Megan wasn't going to tell me what was up, then I'd just have to find out myself. All right, so it's been a few weeks since I first noticed the whole disappearing scar thing, and things with Megan are only getting weirder. One day, she's all soft and sweet, giving me these warm smiles like we're back in the honeymoon phase. Then, out of nowhere, she flips and gets sharp, almost like she's a totally different person. It's like living with two different versions of her, one that's all loving and one that acts like I'm just taking up space in her life. And honestly, it's starting to mess with my head. One night, we're chilling on the couch and she's in a particularly good mood. You know, the kind where she's leaning on me, laughing at my jokes, just perfect. So I decide to bring up this whole mood swing thing in a way that won't sound too serious. "Hey, Megan," I say, half joking. "Do you have like a secret evil twin you're hiding somewhere? 'Cause you've got more personalities than a TV drama." She freezes, and I mean completely. Her smile fades, and her eyes go kind of blank, like she's just been caught doing something. For a second, she looks like she wants to say something, but then she just shakes it off with this forced laugh and mumbles, "You're so funny, Mark." But her voice, it's off, like forced. And suddenly, there's this heavy silence between us. The next morning, she's gone before I even wake up, And when she comes back that evening, it's like the girl from last night was replaced with a new one. Distant, a bit cold, like she's somewhere else entirely. I try talking to her, but she barely responds. The silence is so thick, you could cut it with a knife. I'm officially creeped out. Something's definitely going on here. So I decide to do what any self-respecting, suspicious husband would do, follow her. A few days later, she tells me she's heading to work, all casual like nothing's up. But instead of driving to her office, she takes a left turn downtown and heads towards some random building I've never seen before. I'm trailing behind, keeping my distance, heart pounding like I'm in some spy movie. She parks, gets out, and walks into this building. It looks abandoned, like it's been there for ages. I park across the street and watch her disappear inside, trying to figure out what the heck she's doing here. After a few minutes, curiosity gets the best of me, and I slip out of my car and creep closer. I get to the entrance and hear voices. I lean in, heart racing, and then I hear her. Megan's voice. But here's the kicker. She's talking to someone, and it sounds like she's laughing. And it's not the laugh she gives me at home. It's different, lighter, almost like she's with an old friend. I peek inside, and there she is, standing in the middle of the room looking at someone. But this isn't just someone. It's a woman, and not just any woman. She's identical to Megan, like a mirror image. My mind is blown. All right, so here I am, standing in this random, abandoned-looking building, staring at not one, but two versions of my wife. I can't even process what I'm seeing. It's like a scene out of a movie, except I'm the guy who's totally out of the loop. This woman, she looks exactly like Megan, but there's something off. Her stance, her expression. She's got this confidence Megan doesn't usually have, and the way she looked at me, like she'd been caught, but was way too amused to feel guilty. I take a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. All right, would someone like to explain what on earth is going on here? I'm looking right at her, waiting for some kind of reaction that makes sense. She smirks, crosses her arms, and says, "Didn't expect to see you here, Mark. I thought Megan was handling things just fine." The way she says it, cool, collected, it's almost chilling. This isn't Megan. It's like her twin, but with an attitude. After a long silence, she sighs, clearly seeing I'm not buying any of her casual vibe. "Fine," she says, rolling her eyes. "I'm Jessica, Megan's twin sister, and yes, we've been switching places every now and then." She thought it'd be a fun little game. "A fun game?" I'm practically spitting out the words. "Switching places and fooling me was a fun game to you two?" She shrugs like it's the most normal thing in the world. "Hey, don't take it so seriously. It's not like we were hurting anyone," she says with a smirk. "Just something we've done since we were kids. A little game of who's who." I'm furious, but honestly, part of me is just impressed. They pulled this off, and I had no idea, not a single clue. Every little inconsistency, every odd moment. It all makes sense now, but that doesn't make it any less infuriating. "So you and Megan just swap lives whenever you feel like it?" I ask, trying to process the level of deception here. "Only when it's convenient," she replies with a smug grin. "Sometimes she needs a break. Sometimes I do. It's harmless, really." "Harmless?" I'm practically shaking. "Do you even hear yourself?" Jessica just rolls her eyes again, totally unfazed. "Look, you're overreacting. It's not like we did anything terrible. It was just a way to switch things up. Keep life interesting." Her tone is so casual, like this whole situation's no big deal. I can feel the anger boiling up, but there's something else too. Curiosity. This whole switching lives act sounds like something straight out of a thriller, and I need answers. So I press on, despite my better judgment. "All right, so what's the deal with your game? Why the secrecy? Why didn't Megan tell me she had a twin?" Jessica lets out a small laugh. "Because Megan thought you'd freak out. Guess she was right about that." And that's when I realize they're not just playing games. There's something more here, something Jessica's not telling me. And for the first time, I'm wondering if this little game has more dangerous layers than they're letting on. When I got home, I could barely keep it together. The second I saw Megan, I knew there was no going back. I needed answers, and I needed them now. She tried to brush me off at first, all awkward laughs and, "Come on, Mark, it's not a big deal." I wasn't buying it. This wasn't just some silly prank. All right, Megan, I said, crossing my arms. Spill it. I just met your twin today, and I need to know why the two of you thought it was okay to mess with me like that. Her smile faded, and she looked away, fidgeting. Mark, it wasn't supposed to go this far. It was kind of a test. I blinked, trying to wrap my head around that. A test? Like a test to see if I'd freak out about you having a twin? Well, guess what? Mission accomplished. She sighed and finally looked me in the eye, clearly realizing she wasn't getting out of this one easily. It was a trust test, okay? Jessica and I, we wanted to see if you really loved me, not just the idea of me. So we swapped a few times to see if you'd notice, if you'd tell the difference. A trust test? Megan, do you even hear yourself? I was fuming. This was the kind of plot you'd expect in a reality show, not real life. You actually thought that messing with my head and making me question everything was the way to prove I loved you? She winced, but nodded. It was stupid, I know. But it was harmless, right? I mean, you did notice, so doesn't that say something? I let out a frustrated laugh, running my hand through my hair. Yeah, it says I was suspicious because my wife was acting like two completely different people. You know, maybe next time just ask me if I love you. She nodded, looking genuinely sorry, and reached out to take my hand. Mark, I swear, the game's over. No more tricks, no more swaps. Just you and me. Part of me wanted to walk out right there, but the truth was I loved her. I couldn't just leave, so I took a deep breath and nodded. Fine, but no more secrets, Megan. I'm serious. She promised, and for a moment, things actually felt normal again, like we'd finally cleared the air. But that uneasy feeling lingered, creeping in the back of my mind, reminding me that everything was far from settled. The next day, I tried to shake it off, convince myself it was all in the past. But then my phone buzzed, and when I looked at the screen, my heart skipped a beat. It was an anonymous message. Don't trust them. I stared at those words, feeling my stomach drop. Who sent this? Jessica? Someone else who knew about their game? And more importantly, what else were they hiding? The questions kept piling up, and suddenly, that promise of no more secrets felt like just another part of their twisted game. All right, so here's the thing. After that anonymous text saying, don't trust them, my mind was running in circles. I couldn't get rid of that feeling, like I was a pawn in someone else's twisted game. And it wasn't like Megan was helping ease my suspicions either. She'd act all sweet and casual, but every time I tried to bring up the whole no more secrets talk, she'd just change the subject or laugh it off. Yeah, real reassuring. One night, she was in the shower and I was just sitting there trying to make sense of everything. That's when it hit me. Her phone. She'd left it charging on the nightstand, and for a second I hesitated, but that second passed real quick. I grabbed the phone, opened her messages, and started scrolling, praying I'd find something that would finally make sense of this whole mess. And then I saw it. A whole thread between Megan and Jessica. I started reading, and every word made my heart beat faster. They weren't just chatting about random sister stuff. They were planning something. They kept mentioning the next step and benefits of the marriage. I had no idea what that meant, but it sounded like I'd walked into some kind of scheme. Benefits of the marriage? What benefits? I thought I was just a guy who'd found the love of his life. But reading their messages, it felt like there was some big plan they hadn't bothered to loop me in on. The more I read, the worse it got. Jessica was pushing Megan to move things forward, talking about some documents they'd need signed soon. And then Megan's response, I'm working on it. He's almost ready. Almost ready? For what? I closed the messages and put the phone down, my head spinning. I felt like a total fool. Here I was, thinking I was building a life with Megan. And meanwhile, she and her twin were running some kind of operation right under my nose. What was their endgame? Money? A scam? Or was it something even worse? Later that night, Megan casually mentioned we needed to sign a few documents soon. Some legal stuff, she claimed, but didn't specify what. She played it off like it was no big deal, but my mind was flashing all kinds of red flags. I forced a smile, but inside, all I could think was, I didn't sign up for this. I wasn't just marrying Megan. I was getting tangled in something way bigger, and the way she acted so nonchalant about it only made me feel even more trapped. There were no answers, only questions piling up. And one thing was clear, I needed to find out what this next step really was before it was too late. All right, here's where things went from sketchy to downright twisted. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Megan and Jessica were hiding something way bigger than a simple trust test. I mean, who even does that? So I did what any half-sane person would do when they feel like they're starring in a conspiracy thriller. I hired a private investigator. Yeah, I went full detective mode. A few days later, I got a call from the investigator. He sounded serious, almost too serious, and told me he'd found something I needed to know. Apparently, Jessica was knee-deep in debt with some not-so-friendly people. We're talking about some shady figures who wouldn't think twice about knocking on her door with a few friendly reminders to pay up. And guess what? Megan was helping her cover those debts, using our money. I couldn't believe it. While I was out here thinking I'd found my forever partner, she was busy plotting and scheming, siphoning off our resources to help her sister keep the wolves at bay. And the craziest part? They were both in on it, like it was some normal sister bonding activity. The detective dug deeper, and it turned out they were planning something big. I didn't know exactly what, but it was clear this whole marriage thing was just a means to an end for them. They'd been using me, my trust, and my finances to pull off some master plan, and I'd just been going along none the wiser. Sitting there, hearing all this, I felt like the ground had been ripped from under me. How could I have been so blind? The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't the partner in this relationship. I was just a pawn. Megan and Jessica had crafted this elaborate web of lies, and I'd walked right into it. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. The betrayal was so deep, it left me speechless. Every I love you, every promise, every shared moment, it was all just part of their twisted game. And the worst part? I had no idea how far they were willing to go. I'd had enough. Armed with all the dirt the investigator dug up, I went home, ready for some answers. Megan was sitting in the living room, scrolling on her phone like everything was normal. I couldn't help but feel a surge of frustration. Here I was, unraveling, and she was just chilling. I took a deep breath and walked in. "Megan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk." She looked up, surprised, but not concerned. "Oh, what's up?" I held up the stack of evidence. "I know everything. About you, Jessica, the debts, the whole scheme." Her face dropped. For a second, she looked like she was going to deny it, but then she forced a smile. "Mark, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like." "Oh, really?" I shot back, barely containing my anger. "Because it looks a lot like I'm just a piggy bank you two have been cashing out on, playing on my feelings, lying to my face, treating me like a total fool. That about cover it?" She flinched, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her usual confidence. "Mark, we didn't mean for it to get this far. It just happened. Jessica got into some trouble, and I couldn't just leave her hanging. I thought if we could... "If you could what, Megan?" I snapped. "Keep lying to me until you bled me dry?" At that, she finally broke down, her voice a whisper. "It wasn't like that, at first. But yes, we needed the money, and I didn't know any other way." I just stared at her, feeling a mix of betrayal and pity. "So all those times you looked me in the eyes and told me you loved me, all those promises, they were just lies?" She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "No, Mark, I did love you. I do. It just got complicated." Complicated? I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "That's putting it lightly, don't you think?" She reached out, desperate, but I took a step back. "I'm sorry, Mark. Please, you have to understand. I didn't know what else to do. Jessica is my sister, and she was in deep. I couldn't just let her face that alone." "But you didn't mind using me as a solution," I said, my voice hollow. "You didn't think twice about manipulating the person you claimed to love." She went silent, the guilt evident on her face. There was nothing left to say. I'd finally seen the truth. She'd chosen her sister over our relationship. Every sweet moment, every promise. It was all tainted. I turned to leave, and she called out, voice breaking. Mark, please, I'll make it right. Just give me a chance. I didn't look back. We're past that, Megan. As I walked out, I felt a strange emptiness. In one night, everything I thought was real had crumbled. I'd been betrayed by the person I trusted most, and now I had to figure out how to rebuild alone. Walking away from Megan and cutting ties with both her and Jessica felt like ripping off a bandage that had been holding together a wound too deep to heal. I'd finally freed myself, but man, did it sting. It was like tearing down this whole illusion I'd been living in. I was free, sure, but also gutted. For the first few days, I was just numb. No calls, no texts, no desperate apologies from Megan. It was as if she'd accepted that she'd lost me, and maybe she knew she deserved it. Meanwhile, I had to wrestle with this crazy mix of emotions, bouncing between anger, betrayal, and this weird relief that I didn't have to keep looking over my shoulder anymore. One morning, I woke up, and it hit me. I was finally out. Out of their twisted game, out of the lies, the half-truths, the endless wondering. For the first time in months, I could actually breathe. I was free to do my own thing. No more worrying about who was manipulating me or what next step they had planned. I started focusing on myself, on building a life that didn't include any shadows or secrets. It wasn't easy. Trust doesn't just magically rebuild itself overnight. I mean, after that experience, even small things made me suspicious. But little by little, I started seeing the difference between genuine people and those who only wanted something from me. In a weird way, losing Megan and Jessica was the wake-up call I didn't know I needed. I'd been so wrapped up in them, in wanting to be everything they needed, that I'd totally lost myself in the process. Now, I was learning how to live my life on my terms. Looking back, I realized just how thin the line between trust and deception can be. It's fragile, easily broken, and once it's gone, it takes everything with it. But at the same time, I felt stronger for it. I knew I'd never fall for that kind of manipulation again, not because I'd shut people out, but because now I knew better. In the end, they lost me, and yeah, it hurt, but it also set me free. I was done being a pawn in someone else's game. This time, I was taking control of my own story, and let me tell you, it felt good.